that Delivery Summit Postmastery edition for the first day and the first panel. So we're going to talk to you about deliverability. First of all, excuse my French. I'm a French guy, okay, I don't have the accent at the moment, but my English is far from perfect, so I will try to do my best for that. I'm lucky today to have one of the best deliverability dream team you could have. So I will let each of them introduce themselves, explaining what they want, who they are, what they are doing. So let's start with the first guest. You should know her. I mean, if you're looking to email gigs, if you went to Morg, you can't say you don't know her. So please, let's welcome Laura Atkins.
Hi all, I'm Laura Atkins. I am a deliverability person. I have been doing deliverability for about 20 years now, co-founded D12y, and we have provided tools and we've provided education and we've provided a lot of assistance and work and help in trying to make deliverability actually work for people and make it clear to understand, because there's a lot of ins and outs and there's a lot of technical pieces and there's a lot of social pieces and there's a lot of other pieces. So I'm really excited to be here today and to talk to you guys and to talk with these folks on stage with me.
Thank you and welcome. Next guest, that's a local one. We're in there, so we got to have a local guy to speak. Please, let's introduce Jan-Pieter Cornet.
Hello. Yeah, it's working now. I'm Jan-Pieter. I work at Spamhaus. Glad to be here. Spamhaus is over 25 years been providing IP and domain reputation data, and we try our best to block all of the bad guys and none of the good guys. That sometimes goes wrong, which is why some of the people already here approach me, and that's fine. Let me stress, that's fine. We do not want to block anyone who's actually doing the best to keep this email ecosystem working and thriving. I'm here to answer all of your questions and ideas and. Thanks.
Is it okay a question about the listing? Is it okay a question about the listing? Can you delist my IP?
You can
ask
me anything. Whether it's get done is a different matter, but yes.
Okay, and last but not least, Alex Irina from Postmastery. Yeah, that's Postmastery edition, so we need people from Postmastery. Deliverability specialist. So let's introduce.
Thanks, Yves-Marie. Since we are colleagues, you should have said my name right.
Oh, excuse me.
That didn't happen. I work for Postmastery. I do email delivery work, email infrastructure, and looking forward to this.
So the idea today is to use the chance we got to have these three guests with us to go through some very important subject about deliverability. And I think the main subject for everyone is kind of a new standard. You all know that some two small companies called Yahoo and Google decided to change the rule, whatever. And that's globally what we call a new standard. This is no auth, no entry. And I want to have your point about this. Can you explain a little what is no auth, no entry?
So, no auth, no entry, there are a lot of different definitions. And there's a lot of things that people mean when they say no auth, no entry. But the big piece, and I think the big change that folks are dealing with, is that Google and Yahoo have said that if you are not authorized, if your mail does not have an SPF pass or a DKIM pass, we will not accept it. And Yahoo has said the same thing. Now, I was actually testing some email sending for a different talk I was putting together, and I was doing some hand tests out of one of our dinky little VPSs, and it's not in our SPF record. It doesn't sign with DKIM. It was just a hand SMTP transaction, and Google was just like, no. You are not authorized. You do not have SPF. You do not have DKIM. We are rejecting your mail. So Google has gone hard. And if you don't have a valid SPF and if you don't have a valid DKIM, they're just like, no, we don't want your mail. You can't do it. Yahoo actually accepted the mail, the same mail from the same system at the same time, but they put it in the spam folder, and they're like, we have no clue, and we don't know what's going on here, but we'll just accept it and put it in there. So they're defining no auth, no entry as if you do not have SPF or DKIM, you are not authorized. There are folks in the industry who are pushing the whole concept of DMARC and alignment very close, very hard. Most of them work for companies that are making money off of DMARC. But they are pushing things very, very hard to say that no auth, no entry means everything has to be fully DMARC aligned and P equals reject. And that's not the case. But you do have to have SPF, and you should have DKIM signatures on every message you send, even the dinky little ones I send off of my VPS.
Anything to add, guys?
Yeah, nothing much to add to Laura. I have heard that some of the ISPs are actually moving towards alignment instead of just having a DKIM record. And SPF obviously is easier to break, but even in SPF, some sort of alignment is good. I'm not sure about the status of that. I haven't tested it.
So I haven't tested the alignment piece, but if you're sending more than 5,000 messages a day, if you are a bulk mailer, then they are expecting alignment. And that is something that ESPs should be helping all of their customers do. And I actually did see, I think late last week or early this week, somebody said that they actually got a failure from Google for they work at an ESP or they consult. And they actually said that they did see Google start to refuse because there was a lack of alignment. So it was authenticated, but it wasn't aligned. So that we are moving that way. And I know that for years, for absolute years, I have been telling customers that they should be aligned. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So when you authenticate with SPF, you are saying that this domain here that I am sending from in the envelope from is authorized to send mail from these IP addresses, that these IPs will send mail from this from domain. That domain is in the envelope from. It is not the domain that the user sees when they read the email message in your inbox. That is the from, or the 5322 from is what I tend to refer to it as. So you have the SPF domain, and that domain does not have to be the same domain. And in fact, if you're sending like through AWS, you're often sending through AWS envelope from addresses. If you're sending through certain ESPs, you will have the ESP's email address in that SPF from address. And then again, with DKIM, you can authenticate and you can sign with DKIM with any number of domains. And so you can have a domain that is the same or in the same domain space as your domain that the user sees when they look at your email, or it can be a different one. So the whole idea is that you can SPF authenticate and you can DKIM authenticate, and those domains can be unrelated to the domain that the user sees when they read your message. What alignment means is that one of those domains has to be the same domain or the same subdomain or related to the domain that is in the address that the sender sees. Does that make sense?
Alex, this announcement about no auth, no entry from Google and Yahoo there upon end of last year, have you seen many customers, I know you got many customers, have you seen many customers having issue and struggling? And because when it has been announced, you were having the whole email world running around, screaming around, like rats without heads. So they were getting absolutely crazy. So was it nightmare? Is it chaos?
It was. Yeah, I think a lot of people didn't know exactly what to do. I have a lot of clients that when they heard that they need to set up DMARC, they just set DMARC V equals DMARC 1, P equals reject, and yeah, we're done. And the next day they were asking, Alex, why do we have a 50% bounce rate? So yeah, I think you really need to first look at some DMARC monitoring tools before you implement that. Yeah.
Yeah, all that authentication part, so adding SPF, adding DKIM, adding DMARC, not even DMARC at reject, because what they want at the moment is DMARC with a non-policy. And even if it's not mandatory, you should use a RUA tag to receive the reports, because that's useless to have DMARC if you don't have the reports. But you were talking about alignment, so having the from domain corresponding to the return path or envelope from domain corresponding to the DKIM domain. But was it possible to do that all the time? Because at the end, adding SPF, that's just one DNS record. DKIM, that's not so complicated. I mean, your tool is generating your DKIM key and providing the DKIM record, and DMARC, that's just a record. So globally, it seems to be pretty easy. So where was the difficulty?
The challenge is that a lot of ESPs, particularly, you know, and I'm actually going to talk about this a little bit tomorrow, particularly when you know, we started with authentication, because SPF and DKIM are kind of tacked on to the end of email, and we didn't have any authentication for a long time. So when we first started doing authentication, a lot of the ESPs just handled it internally. And so if you were sending through a particular ESP, the SPF domain and the DKIM domain were actually belonged to the ESP. And in fact, in a lot of places now, you still only have that SPF domain. They don't have the ability to give every one of their users a custom SPF domain. And there's a couple big ESPs. Most of these ESPs are actually ones that kind of focus on the smaller mom and pop style senders, not the big enterprise senders. And it's very challenging to do that, because then you have to run mail infrastructure, because that address does need to be able to receive mail. And so it's not just an SPF record, it's an SPF record and a mail server. And there's a lot of challenges involved in actually getting that SPF to work. On the DKIM side, there's no reason anybody shouldn't be able to send mail signed with DKIM. When DKIM first became a standard and first started getting out into the world, a lot of ESPs, again, would sign with their own domain, and it took them a while to get the infrastructure together so that they could get the private key from their customers and have their customers publish the public key in DNS and do the signing and do all of that kind of thing for the customer's domain. And you know, they gradually improved that software and that deployment and the customer experience to make that easier for everybody to do over the years. But they still have some older customers who never did that and who onboarded after these processes were all in place. And so that's where a lot of the challenge at the ESP level came through, was actually cleaning up a bunch of the cruft and cleaning up things so that the mail and the systems would work for all their customers, not just 80% or whatever they had compliant when the announcement was made.
Can I add a point here? There's actually, especially regarding spam fighting, there's an important point here as well. At Spam House, we tend to look at the entire email that comes into spam traps. And when, for example, as an ESP, you have a customer that's less ethical, or the account gets hacked or something compromised, then they send out a huge spam run. And if all of your email is signed with the same DKIM domain, that DKIM domain gets listed. And then, as a result, all of your customers suffer. So it would at least be better to have a separate domain for each customer to avoid this problem. And when you're doing that, it's even better to have the customer's own domain. Use it. Obviously, if you have a mom and pop shop that doesn't even have an own domain, that's different. And you'll have to set up some of your subdomains or something like that. But yeah, the thing is, if there's something in your email that's in common for all of the mails, and for some reason stuff gets to our spam traps, you risk that thing that's common to get listed. So plan ahead with that.
Yeah, I was having a question for you, Jan Peter. When I started email, So that was a few weeks ago. I'm a teenager, kind of. The main focus was always about IP reputation, IP, etc. Since we started to talk, and talking about no entry, no one mentioned IP. Does now the focus on reputation is removing on the domain? Is it also one effect of that no entry?
Yes, obviously, IPs are still quite important in fighting spam. When we look at average customers, we see that they still block a lot of email based just on the IP address. It is changing though, because a lot of spammers have actually noticed that this is going on, and they move to places where we can't block them. They're too big to block crowd. Where you can sometimes make like free accounts, and then the only option for us is to block on domain, or sometimes even like parts of a URL, which is horrible. But yeah, but usually by domain is, that is expanding definitely. We're seeing more and more getting blocked on domain basis, and you can block on things like hello names in the received headers, or just a hello name, or domain being used in headers or in the body of the message, and that all happens, and that's quite good at catching spam that is coming from places where you don't want to block the IP address, because there's a lot of valid IP coming from that range as well, but there's still spam coming from it because of compromises or something like that, or badly maintained lists, anything. And yeah.
Alex?
Yeah, I think Gmail really made it easier for senders, because nowadays you have the messages saying that Gmail has detected an unusual rate of suspicious emails coming from either your IP address or your domain.
Yeah.
And they're even telling that you're not compliant because the from domain is not aligned neither with the SPF nor the DKIM domain.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really useful.
Yeah.
And by the way, that's they changed their FAQ just recently. And if you consider your domain is considered as a bulk sender one day, you'd be a bulk sender always. Even if you decided to send just 100 messages every day, you'll always be a bulk sender for Google. There is no expiration.
That's new.
Yeah, last week, I guess.
I think we had a question.
Yeah, I was.
Yeah, I just want to ask. So the best way is to spam is to use IP rotation and domain rotation.
The best way to yes, really is the best way to spam. It's sticking there.
That's what I was thinking. You said something new for me, that you also block by something inside the headers. So if like I have these headers and have my company name inside, you can block me by just this header also, or?
Potentially, yes. It's we'd actually, at Spammers, we'd actually have to target it and say, oh, this is a common thing in spam, and so we're going to block it. But yeah, in theory that could happen. And for example, links in like list unsubscribe headers are a fairly obvious target. So they tend to be the same if you're in a mailing list. But yeah, if you really want to spam, you should buy a lot of domains and a lot of IP space. And hey, that's exactly what we see happening. And which is also the reason why we have the zero reputation thing. So if you have a very brand new domain that hasn't been seen yet,
That's why you have to warm up the domain and the IP.
yeah, indeed.
Then we can spam.
Yeah.
I'm
What?
just joking.
Yeah, I was just wondering what your hat color is, but it's okay.
So what is your IP? Jan Peter would like to
Don't
know.
hesitate. You can share your business card with Jan Peter is available, and you can ask him whenever you want to get the listed. That's no problem. Oh no, sorry. I just said he's going to be listed. Well, so, but at the end, what we talk about SPF, using DKIM, using alignment. Globally, that's best practices we've seen, and we're trying to spread since like years. That's a bit surprising because we need now some mailbox providers to block access if you're not applying the best practices. And that mailbox providers, Google, is also known as a some search engine, something like that, so for SEO. And so globally, why companies are happy to apply the best practices for SEO and why they don't when it's about email? You get 2 hours.
Because it always used to work, and now it doesn't anymore. So kind of people are in panic mode. But it used to be very easy to send crap.
I think too, there's a lot of resistance on the technical side, not on the deliverability side, but you know, the folks who send lots of email and who manage lots of email. There's a lot of resistance to stopping mail. Like, they don't want to block legitimate mail, and they don't want to interfere in communication with people. And so there's kind of been this history, and there's kind of been this underlying, we don't want to make it we don't want to make it too hard for people to send real mail, and like real people to real mail. And individual communication and mailing lists and all of that kind of thing. And there's also been some resistance to forcing folks to upgrade their systems. So you'll find there are crufty old systems, usually at like old government installations or old universities, or you know, a server sitting. I know when I worked at University of Wisconsin in the biology lab, we had a little mail server. We actually had a little mail server sitting on our desk that served mail for our lab and managed our lab website and stuff. And it's been more formalized now. But the idea is that there's these old machines that are running and they're running and they're working and the mail is going out. But and you can't upgrade them for all sorts of various political and procedural and process issues. But they're sending valid mail, and they're sending mail that's important to people. And so there's been this resistance to saying you have to be modern and you have to comply with these new standards. And we're going to block your mail if you don't comply with that. Now, what has happened, and in the talks that I've seen and had with the folks at Google and Yahoo, what has happened is they have so instrumented what they're doing and the vast quantities of mail that comes in. They know how much mail is authenticated. They know how much legitimate mail is authenticated. They know how much illegitimate mail is authenticated. And they made this decision. It was a data-driven decision that said, we can do this now because the amount of legitimate mail that we will block is minimal. We know that it's fallen below whatever the percentage that they picked was. It's fallen below 1% or 0.1% or whatever of the mail that we think is legitimate and that our users want. And so we can make this requirement. And additionally, we know that all of this mail that our users don't want doesn't comply. And so we can put this in place and we can block all of this spam right out of the gate without affecting real mail. And so that's part of why we're here, is that the amount of crufty old machines sitting under somebody's lab bench they're not sending mail anymore.
I got one question for you, Alex, to complete about that here, Google requirements. There will be a big change around June. That's about the list and subscribe, and what they call the one-click unsubscribe. It was a bit a mess for many people to understand that, and many well-known people in email as well, because that was quite confusing. And can you explain exactly what is the one-click unsubscribe? Because
may I interrupt? Because I did see
yeah.
two questions from the audience earlier, but I'm not sure if they're still.
Yeah.
If we can take questions.
Yeah, okay.
That'd be amazing.
Yeah, I think one was related to what you were just saying about the bouncing of mails. So can you tell something about the history of how the bounce rates increased related to DMARC, DKIM, and SPF in the last few years? So is this something that has exponentially grown in the last few years, or has this been like a gradual increase of bounce rate regarding this, or how this is increased? Because within our company, we now start noticing it more, and we start embracing some changes or make some changes because of it. But yeah, we also have to sell it to our users that always had no issue in sending mails.
So, the history of authentication in 2 minutes or less. So, SPF, when we started doing authentication, there was a lot of push inside the technical folks that were coming up with these standards to be able to say, if this mail isn't authenticated from this domain, throw it away. And that is actually built into the SPF spec. There is a way that you can say, you know, if it doesn't come exactly from these IP addresses, throw it away. That never actually really kind of took off. A lot of people just publish SPF records, and a lot of the receivers would not reject mail for SPF failures for a whole host of reasons, including the fact that SPF fails all the time. Particularly if you have a domain where you've got individual users who are actually sending mail to other users, like through mailing lists or something, SPF will fail. So SPF was first, and it did have that policy piece where you could say throw the mail away, but that never took on the receiver end, and they didn't. DKIM doesn't have that policy piece. It's basically if a DKIM signature fails, there's no policy associated with it. And there were a couple pushes inside the IETF to try and make some policy associated with DKIM, but it never happened. And then we get to DMARC, which is where people started saying, we want to be able to control how folks are using our domain. And that's kind of where the policy piece got in. So there's always been this piece around DMARC where if the mail does not align or the mail fails both SPF and DKIM, there's like a 4-quadrant failure way that things can happen. And you publish a P equals reject. What you are telling folks if you publish P equals reject is throw my mail away if it doesn't look like I think it should look like. That's what you're telling people, is throw my mail away. And they do, and they will. The new of not having SPF or not having DKIM, that is new and is, I think, it's outside the standard. But is a perfectly valid decision for Google and Yahoo to make of that we will only accept mail that is authenticated with SPF and DKIM. And if it's bulk, that it aligns. Did that answer your question?
I think the question really was if you see increase in rejections and bounces.
Certainly. Well, I mean, the number of rejections for DMARC has, you know, always been there. Google has just started rejecting for lack of authentication. That is very new. So I've not seen any real increase in those types of rejections, except maybe in the last 2 months. But they have said they're going to roll out the rejections slowly. And that was something that was going to start taking effect in February. So, you know, and they're going to roll it out slowly. And I've had this conversation with folks before. I believe that there is a giant dashboard inside Google and there is a giant dashboard inside Yahoo, and they are looking at every bit of mail that comes in and the authentication status, and they're rolling out based on that data. And they're saying, okay, you know, these domains, these IP addresses, this region of the country or this region of the world tends to have worse mail, and so we're gonna inflict our new standards on them first, and then we'll roll it out to the more legitimate end of things. So I think it is going to increase, and it certainly, I've started to see more bounces related to authentication failures in the last 2 months, but that's a fairly new thing.
So, Alex, I will get back to my question about one click and subscribe. Yeah, maybe we'll take some question after because we won't have time to go on all the subjects.
Okay.
We'll have a moment later. Thanks. So, Alex, about one click and subscribe. Can you explain that in detail? Because many people were confusing things. Yeah, okay, I got a link in my email. You can go to the subscription panel. So, is it still possible? Is it still legit?
Yeah, I'll try to be quick about this. Basically, it is what it is. It's it's a header in your emails, and a lot of people confuse that with the unsubscribe link in your footer. And yeah, normally that that footer link should be, yeah, I think it's okay to have for that link to take you to a preference page where you can update your subscription preferences. But the one-click unsubscribe, yeah, it's just a link in your list unsubscribe header, which should do what it says it does. It unsubscribes you with one click.
Okay, that was important to say that it has nothing to do with the email content itself.
Exactly.
No confusion.
It's two different things. One should be used for preferences, and one should be, once you click that, I'm out.
Globally, so
I'd like to add, there's it's subtle. It's actually a two-click because you click on the link, then you get a page, and then you confirm that you're unsubscribed.
no, one click is one click.
Okay.
No,
You think that's over?
Well, then a lot of people are going to get unsubscribed by their virus
No, it's
scanner.
3 to 5 day posts.
Yeah, it's post,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's the confusion. That's what Google and Yahoo mean when they say one click.
Yeah.
Oh,
That's why everybody's confused because it's a stupid term.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, it actually is two clicks, because if you click, you get.
No,
Are you sure you want to
Yeah,
unsubscribe?
you got the Google pop-up on Gmail, right?
The whole point of 8058, which is the IETF standard of how this is supposed to be done, the whole point of this is that you don't accidentally unsubscribe somebody who is sitting behind a filter that follows every link in the mail. And so, you know, there are filters out there, and they're becoming more popular, and I've seen them even at like Office 365 hosted domains and stuff very recently. They follow every link in an email. They click on every link in an email before the email ever hits the user's inbox. And the problem and the problem that the 8058 was supposed to solve is that was unsubscribing people accidentally. And so the way that it works behind the scenes for the one-click unsubscribe is that it's a post and not a get, which means that if a robot does it, then it's a get, and so the email address isn't actually unsubscribed, and so it can be managed robotically, but if it's a real person, then they click, and that click is a post, and then it's a level of web stuff that is beyond me, but that's kind of where we're at.
Globally, to summarize that, yeah, I know we got some question, we'll take time after. Just to summarize, so if you want now to respect the requirement, you need to authenticate, align your different authentication, apply DMARC with a RUA tag, that's important, and using that one-click list and subscribe. Okay, but people that don't manage all their own MTAs, many of the senders are using ESPs to send the messages. So can you do all of this with every ESP? Are they all able to align the from, SPF, DKIM, DMARC? Do they all apply the list and subscribe one click?
I know I'm working with some ESPs that are actually trying to get there.
Yeah.
Regarding what you said, I just want to mention the V2 page from Google Postmaster, and I think it's a very good resource because it really tells you exactly what you want to see, if you're aligned, authenticated, if your list unsubscribe is there, and somehow they also look at if you honor the list, the unsubscribe requests.
Yeah, a lot of this is things that your MTA or your ESP should be handling. And the 8058 compliance is part of the reason that the actual compliance piece keeps getting pushed out, because there are ESPs that are scrambling. I know one ESP that basically has acquired different ESPs over the years, and so they've got like 4 platforms under the covers, and like 2 of the platforms nobody has touched since they acquired them, and so they're having to go back and, you know, actually touch code base that hasn't been touched in 10 years so that they can comply with the list unsubscribe. And that's why that particular piece has been pushed out for enforcement in June. We may see it go even longer than that due to this challenge of these ESPs getting it all in place. But if your ESP cannot do alignment, get out now. Like seriously, just now there is that entire piece of providers out there that refuse that won't let you send mail from you. You have to send mail from them, and so they're all aligned. But I am always really nervous about that because it feels like I'm relying on, say, PayPal or Stripe or Intuit or all these other companies, a lot of them are in the accounting space, to send mail on my behalf and not let anybody come in as a company and impersonate me. And I'm always a little worried about that, but that's where we are.
Okay. And many ESPs as well. They're working with a lot of small companies like restaurants, libraries, whatever you want. And they don't even have their own domain. You were talking about having your own domain, and they don't have their own domain, and they still send email campaign with the from domain is gmail.com. What are the risks for all these small companies? Because that's a real question for them.
Still works for now.
Right, it works for now. So Gmail is talking about going to a more secure, they're going to a higher level of policy in DMARC terms. And so all of these, and telling the world that if you're coming out of a gmail.com address and you're not actually coming out of Gmail infrastructure, that mail should be thrown away. There's a lot of ESPs out there that have spent the last 6 months trying to figure out, do we stop these customers? Do we give them a subdomain of our domain? Do we make them buy their own domain? You know, all of these things. This is the other part of the challenge and the struggle with implementing these standards, is that we're at a point where companies have to have their own domain in order to get their mail delivered at Google and Yahoo.
Yeah, and at the end, globally, so you need to authenticate. Sometimes you can't authenticate due to your ESP or do the full alignment. But who is responsible for that authentication? Who is responsible at the end for the domain reputation? Is it the ESP, the owner of the domain? And who should monitor that?
Yeah, I would say, logically, it's kind of like the sender's responsibility, but I would say both, because if your client as an ESP is not properly authenticated, he might not know that, and then he would just test a different ESP where he actually does proper authentication and alignment, and hey, okay, ESP2 is way better than ESP1, which is not true, but yeah, I think it's better to be proactive, so it's good to have some sort of monitoring as an ESP and look at your customers and say, okay, these guys didn't authenticate yet, they're not properly set up, so maybe we should try to push them towards that, otherwise we might lose them.
One question about that to Jan Peter. If you can't fully align with, I would say, with the SPF domain, so it becomes a shared domain between several customers of that ESP. Is there any risk for that?
Well, yeah, there is. As I just said, that anything that is shared can get listed and get other customers in trouble. You can mitigate the risk by, for example, using subdomains, or just, yeah. I mean, if it happens and you have a credible story, you can also contact the Spam House support desk, and we can make an exception for you. Like, okay, this domain is shared. We won't be able. We will probably tell you, well, you should verify your opt-ins and stuff like that, because we usually see a lot of mails in our spam traps whenever someone starts complaining, because that's the reason they got listed in the first place. But it's possible. I wouldn't recommend it. If you do it, then try to use different subdomains or something like that. That's easier, I guess. And SPF is fairly easy to use with subdomains. So.
Okay.
And maybe have several tiers or something like customers that they haven't really vetted yet, or that sort of stuff. That's another
Just
possibility.
to finish on that part globally, let's say I'm a sender. I'm not sending any email to Yahoo or Google. So is that change for me like storm in a glass water? Or will it spread to any or many other ESP, or does it start already with some other ESPs or mailbox providers?
I've heard some others that are going in the same route. I'm not sure if you know more, Laura. You might.
Yeah, there's certainly there are some country-specific ISPs that have been pushing these kinds of rules for a very long time. And I know that there have been some ESPs that have struggled with delivery to those particular ISPs. But they are very country-specific receivers. Now, I mean, nothing that Google and Yahoo are saying is a bad idea. Like, absolutely nothing that they're saying is bad and is wrong. And so, it's kind of like, it's time to grow up. It's time for the email sending industry to be adults and to like stop just kind of sending a lot of mail without paying attention to how we're sending it. And these are the rules, and these are the things that you need to do to be able to be seen as legitimate. And these are things that you should have been doing. And now, the idea is that if you don't do them, you will have deliverability implications. Because nobody felt like they had to do it because their mail was still getting delivered.
Okay.
An example like the HTTPS, that's everybody was using, and then once the browsers force it, and everybody started using it.
Yeah.
Okay, I've seen we got some question in the audience. Someone here.
It was just an observation with the one-click unsubscribe, specifically with Google. We've noticed that when we onboard customers, as we're warming up the IPs, until the volume gets to the threshold where they're determined to be bulk senders, we unsubscribe that.
Yeah, that was, so you said so.
Yeah, Google, and I've actually been getting this question from clients. They're like, well, Tuesday we had the unsubscribe button, and Wednesday we didn't, and then Thursday and Friday we did, and then, so the display of the unsubscribe button is completely at the discretion of whoever runs the MUA, the mail client that the user is using. So if it's in the Google web interface, it's Google. If it's on your phone, it's your Google Mail or your Apple Mail or your Outlook for mobile. The display of that is completely out of your control. It will be displayed if it's decided that it should be displayed, but you have to have it whether or not it's displayed. And there's a poor person over here that just had a question.
You got a microphone.
I get the special mic. So I see some ESPs going back to DKIM signing. I see some ESPs will double DKIM sign, so the first DKIM will often be their domain, followed by the customer's bespoke domain. My question is, does that actually have an impact? And actually, is that actually being signed by both, or is the ISP just picking the first or the second?
So it is unclear, and I've never actually gotten a direct answer from any of the folks at the ISPs. But the reason that they double sign is so that they have access to the Yahoo feedback loop. Like, the Yahoo feedback loop is domain key based, and so the easiest way for an ESP to get all of the feedback from all of their customers is to sign with their DKIM domain. With all of the alignment and, in informal conversations and in talking with folks, I believe that the way that the ESP, or the way that the ISPs are, assigning reputation, that you will have a reputation for the shared domain and you will have a reputation for the aligned domain. And I think that more weight is given to the aligned domain than the shared domain. But we're looking at what is essentially under the cover, machine learning, and machines learn weird things. So, if a particular ESP has a lot of cruddy customers and have a lot of customers that's sending a lot of mail that's being complained about, then that DKIM signature can be an indicator that that's a bad ESP and all of their customers will start to suffer. And I've certainly seen Google do that with ESPs in the past who had a lot of really awful customers, that all of a sudden all of the customer mail started going bad and going to bulk. So it's hard to be able to say in situations like this where exactly, there aren't any firm answers because we don't know. And it's probably different depending on a lot of different factors because it's all machine learning under the covers.
Yeah. Just to complete that, from what I've seen, since we are seeing, so in November we are starting to see default coming from Google. So what Alex explained, telling that we see a normal volume of message coming from that DKIM or that SPF. I never seen such a message for second DKIM signature domain. It was always for the first DKIM signature as well. If you have just the DKIM domain aligned with the from domain, you will see only that message. In a way, they try to really find who is the real sender, and not, having an impact on the real sender, so the domain owner globally, and not on the ESP. That authentication is that way to do that, and in that same period, that's really experience. I was working with one of my ESPs, and he was not having dedicated SPF domain for his customers. So at the beginning, we were having only messages about DKIM, but only. And when he started to implement that DKIM SPF alignment for his customers, we started to see many messages about SPF deferred. So really, there's no trap. They really use a second DKIM domain, as you said, for Yahoo feedback loop, or Tobias will speak about that tomorrow, about the CFPL header, so for the new feedback loops. And really, they got so many criteria to analyze. Be sure that before blocking the ESP, it will mean that all messages sent by the ESPs over all his IPs are crap messages. Yeah. They will first block you as a sender, and they will ask to the ESP to react and do something and block you. So really, they're really targeting senders, and that's what they say. Look at the wording in their documentation is really important. That's a new sender guideline, not the new ESP guidelines. That's really, words are really important. We got a question there.
Nope, Laura's good.
There. Oh, sorry, excuse me.
Yeah, I had something to add to the DKIM header order, double DKIM signing, because it is so there's a very popular ESP out there that does double DKIM signing. The majority of them that I've seen will put the customer DKIM signature first, and then the essentially platform or ESP DKIM signature kind of as a fallback. The one that does not, I have seen different inbox placement results based, from the same root sender domain, but depending on which one is first. It seems like whichever signature comes first, there is a bit of primacy on that reputation. So I would say I've been working with this ESP to get this resolved, but obviously, as Laura was saying, it's huge. Many of them have a lot of tech debt, and they're really loath to touch certain parts of the code, especially with things under increased scrutiny now, such as DKIM, but it does seem to matter the ordering of the double DKIM signing from what I've seen in terms of inbox placement results. And I would say the ideal would be to have the customer domain first, so that is primarily what's carrying the reputation.
That's what we apply with all our customers. First signing with the from domain, and then signing with the ESP domain. Because the ESP DKIM signature in all the header you're signing will include the first DKIM signature as well to protect. So always the sender first, and then the ESP.
But the topmost is often the last
Yeah, I tend to go first is first down, last signed. Top down, last signed, anyway.
The other, yeah.
This question is with IP version 6 and anti-spam services. I mean, do they blocklist IP version 6 as well? We've started sending emails through IP version 6. I mean, around 100,000 emails now.
Yep, Spamhaus has IPv6 in the block list, but we block by /64 unless.
64?
Yes. So make sure every customer has their own /64.
Okay, because I've been seeing, I was trying to enter an IP version 6 in one of the anti-spam services, and it said it's not a valid IP address, so I just wanted to confirm.
There are probably services out there that
Yeah.
don't recognize those. I know I kind of go, v6. I don't want to know, because it's complicated. I can't read that number that high a number. But the other thing to remember when you're sending over v6 is that, again, going back to that idea that there are these old mail servers on the planet, and there are these old mail servers that send valid mail. If you're sending over v6, you have installed this mail server since whatever the year is, and so you should be doing DKIM, you should be doing SPF, it should be aligned, you should be doing all of these things, because this is not a server that's been sitting in somebody's lab since 1999. This is a server that has been installed and updated for a more modern system, and the expectations are higher and the requirements are higher. And you should have a PTR record.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Laura, for subtitles. We got a question in front.
Hey, thanks. It was a question about list unsubscribe and the two components of it. So the link itself and then the list unsubscribe post in the header. Is there any bearing on the order of those in the header? Should one follow the other, or does it not matter?
No.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
So, hi, I'm Dima from smsp.com. So to circle back on something Laura mentioned, when we talk about no auth, no entry, we kind of forget that SPF is kind of ancient technology, and a lot of mailbox providers don't really trust it anymore. So as we are going through this current conundrum, is there something we should look into the future, potential technologies, potential RFCs that are being in production right now, so that we can prepare ourselves for something that's coming in a year or two?
To the best of my knowledge, there are no new authentication techniques currently in discussion. And I say that as somebody who chaired the DKIM working group for the IETF recently.
Well, maybe not specifically authentication techniques, but I mean, one list unsubscribe is not an authentication technique, but now it's a requirement. So what do you guys think? What could become a requirement in the next few years? What should we be preparing ourselves for?
I heard Beamy. Yeah, I can do subtitles as well.
Yeah, that one, buy me a drink. I think, so if you look at what standards are coming up, most of the time when we're looking at standards and when we're looking at these kinds of announcements of what we're going to require, they're actually addressing a particular problem. They're not just coming out of, somebody didn't just say, oh, hey, let's do SPF, or oh, hey, let's do DKIM. It was we have this problem, how can we solve it? And so I think in terms of what kinds of toolbox we have right now, we have a lot of tools in that toolbox. We have domain authentication. We have addressed the issue of bots unsubscribing. So I'm not really sure kind of what's out there, but I would more look towards what are the problems, what's the threat model, where are folks struggling to block bad mail, and how is that falling over into affecting good mail? And where are we in the piece of, in the email ecosystem, where are the holes that the bad guys are finding? And you know this way better than I do. But you know, what is going on? Like there was a recent issue with folks being able to like sneak emails in because it was a dot stuffing thing, and it's fairly technical, but there were a lot of folks that were being able to sneak emails in because some MTAs were being generous at what they were accepting, and they were accepting essentially non-SMTP mail. And so that was being exploited, and that was getting mail through, and mail was being authenticated because of how it was being sent. Misauthenticated because it was how it was being sent. And so keeping an eye on what the threats are and keeping an eye on where are the bad guys going, what are the bad guys doing, and you know, you can like just keep up with some of the technical press, set up a couple Google alerts for email exploitation or things like that. And just keep an eye on what are the bad guys doing and looking at the problems that the bad guys are causing, because all of these standards, everything that we're doing is a way to stop bad mail from getting into people's inboxes. And it's not just spam, it's viruses and it's malware and it's phishing and it's all of these like, you know, Bitcoin exploits and all of this stuff. Everything that we have done over the last 20 years has been an attempt to stop somebody from harming people. And to be able to better distinguish harmful mail from safe mail and harmful mail from wanted mail. And so the idea, I think, is pay attention to where the bad guys are going and what they're exploiting. And they have started exploiting SPF, and they have exploited DKIM. And you know, some of the things that Google and Yahoo are doing will minimize that DKIM replay attack. But you know, DKIM replay attacks were not as easy to do, and so they moved on, and now they're doing SPF escalation attacks, or whatever we're calling them these days. You know, so everything that we're doing is a way to stop the bad guys from harming folks.
Okay, we got one last question.
So actually, to follow on that, as far as the DKIM working group with the IETF, has there been any discussion around quantum computing perhaps breaking DKIM or being able to reverse engineer DKIM encryption, or, you know, so that you could effectively spoof a fully DKIM authenticated message or man-in-the-middle attack it, essentially?
So the group was rechartered to specifically address the replay attack issue. And so that was out of scope, which is very technical for IETF of no, we didn't do that. I mean, we already know that there are keys and there are key links out there that are resistant to quantum computing, as I understand it. I'm not a cryptologist. But at this point, we're fine. And it's a whole lot easier to, you know, to do other attacks, to fake somebody's DKIM signature.
Okay. We're close to the end, so now I think it's time to say thank you. Thanks to the three of them. You can make any applause, what you want. Scream. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Jan-Peter. Thank you, Alex Irimia. Yeah, trying to. You know, I'm learning from time to time. And thank you, everyone. And just at the conclusion, I mean, we spoke a lot about the new technical requirements, but there is something really important you got to have in mind. Your reputation is not only about the domain itself. It's about what you're sending through that domain. Your messages, your list are very important. And as Google said, this is one of the three major points of their requirements. Only send messages to people that are interested with your messages. And it has a lot of impact, and even, I would say, the main impact on your reputation. That's the main point. You can use how many domain, how many IPs you want. Your list could destroy you in one time. So, thank you.